Whenever you talk with Marvel fans about different heroes, be they within the Marvel Cinematic Universe or otherwise, inevitably the discussion turns to who could possibly lift Thor's iconic hammer. And I'm talking about Mjolnir here, not Stormbreaker, which is really more of an axe than a hammer if you want to split hairs. Plus, it doesn't have the whole needs to be worthy thing tied to it, so pretty much anyone strong enough could theoretically lift it. Anyways, with the possibility of the hammer returning in Thor Love and Thunder, we might as well just go ahead and get into the discussion ourselves, shall we? In this video, I'm going to spend some time taking a look at a few characters that have either already or are going to appear within Phase 4, and break down why I think they might be able to lift the hammer. Note that I'm not saying that they will, just that they could, so it's all theoretical stuff. Understood? Cool. So okay, let's go ahead and dive right into it with a couple of fairly obvious options. We can't really talk about the hammer in Phase 4 without bringing up the person we might actually see using it. I'm of course talking about Jane Foster, making her first proper appearance since she disappeared from the Thor franchise after Thor: The Dark World. Yes, I'm not counting Endgame because it was really small. Currently, Jane Foster is slated to take up the role of Lady Thor within the 4th Thor film, Love and Thunder, which is exciting, but if you know anything about her time as the Goddess of Thunder in the comics, it's not exactly looking too good for her. See, while Thor was off fighting Gore the God Butcher, Foster was diagnosed with breast cancer and began undergoing treatment. Once she took up the hammer for herself, she seemed to be fine once again, as she effectively became a god. However, this came at a price, as the cancer was still present in her body, and anytime she transformed into Lady Thor, her magical transformation purged all toxins from her body, which, if you know anything about chemotherapy, kinda sucks because it sort of rendered all of that effectively useless. So the cancer was able to spread unabated. And so, after one last climactic battle to save the lives of Asgardians, the cancer claimed her life. It's tragic stuff that I can't imagine Disney and Marvel would really want to do without some kind of happy ending. But hey, based on the comics, that's the sort of thing we've got to look forward to once Jane Foster picks up Mjolnir. Thor is almost so obvious of a character that I debated even bringing him up in this section. But I feel like with Jane Foster coming back and apparently taking on the role of Mighty Thor, there might be something worth talking about here. Within the comics, Jane Foster initially gained the ability to wield Mjolnir after Thor lost his ability to do so, with the hammer becoming lost on the moon. So what if something happens in his battle against Gore the God Butcher that removes his worthiness in the, I guess, eyes? Though hammers don't really have eyes, but whatever. Of this newly returned hammer. What if he has to do something truly heinous in order to beat back the unstoppable wielder of All Black the Necro Sword? Or maybe, if he does what he did in the comics and actually bonds with All Black himself briefly, what if that renders him unworthy of the hammer? Or maybe he'll become physically incapable of wielding the thing himself. Like, what if he loses both of his arms somehow? Or maybe he'll get put into a coma or otherwise become incapacitated. Crazier things have happened. Though, let's be honest, he'll be able to pick it up if he wants to. It's Thor after all. Wouldn't make the most sense in the world if he's unworthy. For a short amount of time, maybe. But it won't stay permanent. If you were to ask actress Brie Larson if she thought that her character Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, could lift Mjolnir, she would tell you yes with as much confidence as you would expect. I, however, would argue differently, since I think that Danvers' sort of arrogant attitude might disqualify her from it. However, there is at least one other member of the upcoming Marvels film that I think could do it, that being Monica Rambeau. We saw the kind of person that Rambeau is when she appeared on the Disney Plus show WandaVision. She's idealistic, always striving to help people, even when it puts her in conflict with her employers. She's the kind of person who stepped in front of a hail of gunfire in order to try to stop the children of Wanda and Vision from being gunned down in the streets of Westview. Now sure, the powers that she had just recently acquired due to her interaction with the field Wanda had put around the city saved her from turning into Swiss cheese. But she didn't seem to know that that was gonna happen, based upon the look of utter surprise she had on her face after the bullets passed through her and then fell to the ground. For all intents and purposes, she seemed like she was ready and willing to die to save those kids from the soldiers. If that doesn't make her worthy, I don't know what could. I mean, self-sacrifice is what made Thor worthy, so why not Rambeau? So while Carol Danvers might not be able to pick up Mjolnir herself, I for one think that the daughter of her best friend probably could. One character that almost always comes up when friendly, or sometimes not so friendly I guess, debates over who could pick up the hammer starts is everyone's favorite neighborhood Spider-Man. And rightly so. He is probably the biggest character within any Marvel universe, cinematic or otherwise. So naturally, he'll come up quite a bit. And the specific MCU version of the webhead might just be one of the most likely to be able to do so. Tom Holland's Peter Parker has a heart of pure gold. The worst thing he's done in any of the movies is screw up trying to genuinely help people. Okay, so he did almost blow up that one guy in Far From Home, but come on. Who hasn't almost blown up someone as a teenager? We've all been there, right? So if someone this pure of heart wasn't worthy, how could anyone possibly be? Speaking of pure of heart, I've got to bring up Alexei Shostakov, aka Red Guardian, from Black Widow. Now sure, he might have done some pretty horrible things in the past, or at least he was hinted at having done some bad things. But in the end, all he is a man who wants to do right by his family that he felt he had lost, and finally got the chance to get back. This is a man who would do anything for his daughters, and just wanted to set things right. He even stood up against the might of the Red Room, knowing full well that it was an extremely daunting task. So while he might not necessarily be the most worthy person in the eyes of pretty much everyone else, his steadfast dedication might just be the thing that makes him worthy. You remember back around the time that Endgame came out, when everyone and their mom was discussing whether or not Thanos could lift the hammer? With some arguing that he could because he so firmly believed that what he was doing was truly right? Well, it might just be the same situation with Shostakov. Plus, I mean, if Captain America could do it, you know that Red Guardian would at least try, just to prove that he was at least equal to his US counterpart. What If gave us a slew of alternate reality versions of some of our favorite MCU heroes. Perhaps the most important of all of them was the version of Stephen Strange from the episode What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands? Now, this version of Doctor Strange did some pretty horrible stuff that would more than likely disqualify him from ever even going into the same room as the Hammer. Like, I don't know, dooming his entire reality while trying to save his girlfriend? Spock would be very disappointed in Strange Supreme. The phrase, "the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," isn't exactly something that he subscribes to, apparently. But that's if we don't take into account what he does as the season goes on. Strange Supreme wound up working alongside the Watcher and the Guardians of the Multiverse to take down the super-powered Infinity Ultron, who sought to silence pretty much all life across the entire multiverse. This version of Ultron is arguably the most powerful enemy we've ever seen within the MCU, perhaps even within any version of the Marvel Universe. So fighting him is one of the most daunting things any hero has had to do yet. So as far as I'm concerned, anyone who fought him automatically qualifies for worthiness. That and a $5 Dave & Buster's gift card. But then Strange Supreme went above and beyond, agreeing to watch over the pocket dimension holding Armin Zola and Killmonger for all time, giving up any efforts to try to restore his world. That's quite the undertaking, quite the sacrifice. And since we've seen that the Hammer is a big fan of sacrifice, this might just be enough to get him the ability to pick it up for himself. That's if it is able to get past the whole destroyed his own universe thing, which is kind of a tough sell. The newest member of the MCU roster, at least as of this recording, Shang-Chi is an interesting entry to discuss. On the surface, he is basically just a mortal man who is really good at martial arts, torn apart by some serious family issues. But perhaps this is what makes him a near perfect candidate for worthiness. See, Shang-Chi wasn't just fighting his father in his solo film. He was fighting a man who was wielding the entire weight of the 10 rings, a set of magical armbands that grant their user access to mystical powers beyond their wildest imagination. So yeah, he is certainly a very brave hero, and while bravery might not be enough to wield the hammer on its own, it wouldn't surprise me if he's able to do something that elevates him to worthiness in the near future. So while he might not be there at this point, I'd be willing to bet that with a few more appearances in future movies, he'll get there. Just gotta give him a little bit more time. WandaVision didn't just give us Monica Rambeau, a character I've already argued should be able to lift Mjolnir. It also gave us another version of the android Vision, the aptly named Anti-Vision. Now, some of you might argue that this entry is kinda cheating. I mean, the original Vision showed us that he was worthy within the first few minutes after he was born. So, theoretically, since this is the same bot body, he should still be worthy. Theoretically. But it is worth noting that there are a few differences between Vision and this new version of him. First and most obvious is the fact that he is missing the Mind Stone, since, Thanos kind of aggressively borrowed it. It is possible that the presence of the Mind Stone played a role in Vision being able to pick up the hammer. This is an Infinity Stone we're talking about here. Their powers within the movies are kind of nebulous and a little bit vague, so who knows? It could have been a factor at least. This Anti-Vision also doesn't seem to have the memories of Jarvis nor the personality of him. There is no way of knowing how much of that made him worthy. But I will argue that this Anti-Vision will be able to reclaim his worthiness after a little bit, once he's able to reconnect with the Vision that he once was, restoring the Bot-Man to his full glory. I'm sure he'll be able to wield Mjolnir if he ever needed/gets the chance to. Sylvie is arguably a bit of a villain. She kills and manipulates people constantly throughout her appearances in the Loki Disney Plus series, even going so far as killing Kang, despite his warnings, dooming all of existence to a massive multiversal war, and probably bringing about the rise of an even worse Kang the Conqueror, all in the name of avenging herself and bringing down the TVA, a seemingly necessary evil. But she might just fall into the same sort of situation that I mentioned earlier with Thanos and Red Guardian. She is someone who so fully believes that what she's doing is right, and that she needs to do it to save all of existence from having their free will stripped from them, that level of pure determination may just be enough to make her worthy to lift her brother's, or maybe sister's, hammer. But it's worth pointing out that she is a Loki, and Lokis don't need the hammer. In fact, I can't imagine one would really see any need to pick it up. Well, okay, some of them probably would in order to gain even more power for themselves, but that in turn would probably just make them unworthy, so the whole thing is kinda self-defeating. That being said, of all the Lokis, Sylvie might just be the most determined, which could make her the most worthy in the long run. Well, most worthy except for one other Loki. Okay, so ignoring the fact that I literally just said that Lokis don't really need the hammer, this Loki would probably choose to use it, and in turn would probably be pretty worthy of doing so. Loki as a character is flawed, but ultimately he has shown that he is a good person who tries to do what is right. Admittedly, he tends to do it in the most selfish way possible, but still the point stands. And this version of Loki might just be the best of all of them. Torn out of his timeline by the TVA after escaping with the Tesseract, this Loki very quickly learned that he wasn't going to be able to survive and achieve his goals by being selfish and only looking out for himself. While working alongside Sylvie to take down the TVA, he learned humility and the importance of trusting others. He grew as a character, which is not something that you can usually say about Loki without having to watch him in multiple films first. Basically what I'm saying is he became the good guy Loki that we saw die at the beginning of Infinity War without having to go through the events of the Dark World and Ragnarok. So that's something. And it all culminated in the final moments of the show, where he risked his entire relationship with Sylvie, a character he may actually care more about than himself, in order to try to save all of existence from a threat he could only begin to try to comprehend. A future that could doom all worlds across all realities. Something that other versions of Loki might not really care to do anything about. We see Loki sacrifice a happy life with someone that he seems to love for the good of others. If the hammer values sacrifice in order to do what's right, does it always have to be sacrificing one's own life? Or is giving up love enough to show that someone is worthy of wielding the power of Thor? As far as I'm concerned, it's more than enough. which is why this Loki can pick up Mjolnir. Hey there everybody, I'm John Algetz. I'm the guy who made this video, and I want to know what you think. Who do you think could lift the hammer in Phase 4? Let me know in the comments down below, or go ahead and shoot me a response over on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to CBR for more great videos in the future.